Did you know that for centuries, maps of the world deliberately minimized Africa's size and importance? This is the story of how maps, far from being objective representations of reality, became powerful tools of conquest, erasure, and ultimately, the reshaping of an entire continent. We begin our journey by looking back at early worldviews. Before the age of exploration, European maps often reflected cultural biases rather than geographical accuracy. Medieval Theo maps, for instance, placed Asia at the top, dwarfing Europe and Africa. This wasn't about a lack of knowledge, it was a reflection of a Eurocentric worldview where the East held a position of prominence, both real and imagined. In these maps, Africa was often relegated to a smaller, less detailed section, reflecting a limited understanding and a lack of perceived importance. Some even included mythical figures and creatures, blurring the lines between reality and fantasy. The inclusion of the mythical Christian king Prester John in Ethiopia is a prime example, reflecting European hopes of finding powerful Christian allies during the Crusades. But not all early maps were so dismissive. In 1154, the Arab cartographer Al-Idrisi created a world map that, while not entirely accurate by modern standards, offered a more nuanced view of Africa. Commissioned by King Roger II of Sicily, Al-Idrisi's map drew on both Arab and European knowledge. However, even this relatively advanced map portrayed Africa as largely uncircumnavigable, with incomplete southern outlines. This perception would persist for centuries, hindering European exploration and perpetuating a limited understanding of the continent's true size and shape. The game changed in 1488 when Bartholomew Dias rounded the Cape of Good Hope. This groundbreaking voyage shattered the long-held belief that Africa was uncircumnavigable and opened up new possibilities for trade and exploration. Suddenly, more accurate coastal mapping became possible, and the race to chart the African coastline began. The rediscovery of Ptolemy's works in the 15th century also had a profound impact on cartography. Ptolemy's geographical system, which blended Greco-Roman knowledge with emerging explorations, provided a framework for creating more accurate maps. However, it also introduced its own set of biases and inaccuracies, which would influence mapmaking for centuries to come. But let's not assume that mapmaking was solely a European or Arab endeavor. Indigenous African knowledge played a crucial role in shaping early maps, even if that contribution was often unacknowledged. Thomas Bassett's 1998 study, Indigenous Mapmaking in Intertropical Africa, sheds light on the ways in which Africans shared their knowledge of rivers, routes, and resources with early European explorers. This information was often incorporated into European maps, but the source of that knowledge was rarely credited. This erasure of African agency is a recurring theme in the history of African cartography. By the 18th century, maps began to reflect the growing European involvement in the transatlantic slave trade. Rivers, once simply geographical features, became exploitation routes for extracting resources and transporting enslaved people. These maps emphasized the coastal regions and the waterways leading inland, highlighting the infrastructure of the slave trade. The focus shifted from depicting the continent's diverse geography to mapping its potential for exploitation. Then came the Scramble for Africa. The Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885 formalized the carving up of the continent among European powers. Suddenly, maps became tools of political division, delineating colonial borders that often disregarded existing ethnic and cultural boundaries. These borders, drawn arbitrarily on maps in European capitals, would have a lasting and devastating impact on the African continent. The maps of 1935 tell a stark story. They depict a continent almost entirely under European control, divided into colonies and protectorates. British Rhodesia, Belgian Congo, French West. Africa, Portuguese Angola. These were just some of the entities that emerged from the scramble for Africa. These colonial maps served a dual purpose: to legitimize European control and to facilitate the administration and exploitation of African resources. But even within this context of colonial domination, there were instances of resistance and alternative perspectives. The story of Liberia is particularly interesting. Founded in 1847 as a republic for freed Black Americans, Liberia produced its own maps, offering a different perspective on the continent. In 1868 and 1874, Black American explorer Benjamin Anderson mapped Liberia's interior along the St. Paul River. His maps documented indigenous districts and resources, providing valuable information about the region's political landscape. These maps, created by an African-descended explorer, offer a rare glimpse into the interior from a non-colonial perspective. The legacy of colonial borders continues to haunt Africa today. The arbitrary lines drawn at the Berlin Conference have contributed to ethnic conflicts, political instability, and economic challenges. The 1994 Rwandan genocide, for example, can be traced in part to the division of Hutu and Tutsi groups by German and Belgian colonial borders. The names on the map also reflect this legacy. Rhodesia, once a symbol of British colonial power, is now divided into Zambia and Zimbabwe, a rejection of the colonial past. Bechuanaland is now Botswana, another example of a nation reclaiming its identity. But there is a suppressed history that needs to be told. European maps often suppressed African cartographic expertise, crediting European explorers while downplaying the crucial role of indigenous knowledge. Pre-colonial maps showed thriving African states like the Sokoto Caliphate and the Ashanti Empire, but these were often erased in narratives that portrayed Africa as an unknown and uncivilized land ripe for conquest. The inclusion of mythical figures like Prester John fueled European interventions, while the Berlin Conference ignored the existence of hundreds of ethnic groups, creating artificial borders that continue to cause problems today. Even today, Anderson's Black-authored Liberian maps were sidelined in Eurocentric collections until recently, highlighting the ongoing struggle to recognize African contributions to global knowledge. The story of African maps is a story of power, knowledge, and the enduring legacy of colonialism. By understanding how maps were used to shape perceptions and justify conquest, we can gain a deeper appreciation for the complexities of African history and the ongoing challenges facing the continent today.